The community center was packed so tight the air felt used up. Folding chairs scraping, voices buzzing, people pretending they came for updates when really they came to see whether Claire Winters would finally break. She stood at the microphone with her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the stand, and in the front row, Marjorie Hale sat perfectly composed, pearls at her throat, smiling like she still owned the story. Claire swallowed, stared straight at her, and said, "You called me a thief. You made sure my son heard it at school. You made sure this town believed it." Then she lifted one piece of paper, just one, and read the line that made the room go silent. "Use Claire Winters," she said, voice steady now. "She's disposable." A chair creaked. Someone whispered, "No." Marjorie's smile finally slipped. And that's when the quiet man everyone ignored, the one in work boots who'd been standing in the back like he belonged to the wall, took one step forward and said calmly, "My name is Nathaniel Rowe. I own the project you stole from, and I brought the audit. If you like stories where the truth doesn't beg to be believed, where it shows up with receipts, subscribe to The Last Receipt. Because to understand how Claire got to this room, you have to go back to the night they..." Claire Winters' life had never been the kind you could summarize in a single word like easy. It was a mosaic of small wins and quiet panic. Late fees negotiated away by charm and stubbornness, lunchbox notes written with love while her mind ran the numbers in the background, and the constant practice of making a grocery list and then making it smaller because Noah needed new sneakers more than she needed name-brand cereal. In Riverton, a coastal town that smiled like it was friendly and judged like it was sport, Claire's last name didn't open doors. Winters meant you worked. Winters meant you didn't complain too loudly. Winters meant you were nice, which was often just another word people used when they expected you to accept less. Claire was 32, raising her 9-year-old son Noah on a tight budget and an even tighter schedule. She worked admin hours at the resort development project on the edge of town, routing invoices, logging deliveries, answering the same emails that made other people feel important, and she picked up extra shifts where she could. Some weeks she cleaned a neighbor's rental property in exchange for cash. Some weekends she helped her mother, June, at the clinic with paperwork because June's hands weren't as steady as they used to be. Claire didn't want pity. She wanted stability. She wanted the kind of peace you can breathe. Evan Hale had felt like the answer to a prayer Claire hadn't let herself say out loud. He was warm in a way that didn't seem performative. He laughed easily. He showed up. He treated Noah like a person, not a prop. The first time Noah had asked if Evan could come to his science fair, without the cautious hesitation kids usually have around new adults, Claire felt something unclench in her chest. Evan brought a folding chair and snacks, sat in the front row, and clapped like Noah's small volcano project mattered as much as any gala. Later, in Claire's kitchen, Evan washed dishes without being asked and said, "You don't have to do everything alone." Claire hated how much that sentence made her want to cry, because it meant she'd been doing everything alone for so long she'd stopped noticing it. When Evan proposed, he didn't do it with fireworks. He did it in her living room, while Noah pretended not to watch too hard. Evan held her hands and said, "I choose you. I choose all of it." Claire said yes with tears that tasted like relief. She believed she'd found a man who would choose her, even when choosing her wasn't convenient. But Evan's family lived in a different universe, and that universe had rules. The Hales weren't just wealthy, they were embedded. Their name was on plaques and programs and the town's memory. Their donations came with strings nobody mentioned out loud. They were the kind of people who didn't need to shout, because everyone leaned in anyway. Marjorie Hale, Evan's mother, was the center of that gravity. She didn't insult you with a sneer. She did it with a smile and a sentence that sounded like common sense. The first time Claire met Marjorie, it was at a charity brunch, and Marjorie had asked about Noah with an expression of polite interest. Then she'd asked, very casually, "And his father?" Claire had answered with a careful truth, "He's not involved." And Marjorie's smile had tightened like a knot. "Well," she'd said, as if delivering wisdom, "we all make choices." It took Claire a full day to realize the insult was that Marjorie believed Noah was Claire's consequence. The engagement party was Marjorie's idea, held at the waterfront club with big windows staring into the black ocean like an expensive painting. Claire told herself not to read too much into that. "She wants to celebrate," Evan insisted. "It'll be fine." But the week before the party, little things started pricking Claire's instincts. Evan mentioned a family attorney who wanted to prepare standard paperwork, and when Claire asked what kind, Evan said, too quickly, "It's just a prenup conversation. You know how my mom is." Claire tried to laugh. "A prenup conversation before we even set a date?" Evan's cheeks flushed. "It's not personal," he said. "It's practical." Practical.
the same word people used when they wanted to make cruelty sound responsible. On the day of the party, Claire tried to treat it like a milestone, not a test she might fail. She spent an hour in her small bathroom curling her hair and pinning it back with bobby pins that never stayed put. Noah sat on the closed toilet lid swinging his legs, holding a folded paper boat he'd made out of homework scrap. "You look like a movie star," he declared with the fierce sincerity only children have. Claire smiled and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "That's because you're biased," she teased, but her throat tightened anyway. She had bought her dress on sale and altered it herself, sewing late at night when Noah slept. In Claire's world, you didn't pay extra for things you could make with your own hands. She wondered if Marjorie would notice. She wondered, more painfully, if Marjorie would treat that ingenuity like a flaw. The waterfront club glowed with warm lights and polished wood. A string quartet played through the room like it was trying to soften the edges of what money does to people. Claire walked in holding Evan's hand, and she felt eyes land on her like fingertips. Marjorie greeted her with an elegant hug that was more air than contact. "Claire," she said, sweet as a dessert menu, "you made it." The phrase sounded like a compliment and a warning at the same time. Marjorie's friends smiled with narrow eyes, taking inventory. One of them said, "She's pretty," as if that was surprising. Another said, "She's brave," and brave sounded like poor in a nicer dress. Claire tried to ignore it. She focused on Evan, on Noah's small hand in hers, on the idea that love was supposed to be bigger than a room. Evan squeezed her fingers, but his attention kept flicking toward his mother like he was checking for permission to breathe. That should have been a sign. Claire didn't want it to be. Dinner passed in polite waves. People asked Claire what she did for work as if measuring how far she could be used. Someone asked if Noah's father paid child support. Someone else joked, "Evan's a catch," and laughed like Claire should be grateful she was even in the room. Claire answered with practiced calm, but inside she felt the familiar tightening, the feeling of being examined instead of welcomed. Then the speeches began. The room shifted into that attentive hush people reserve for those who can grant favors. Marjorie stood last. She held her champagne flute in one hand and a slim white folder in the other. Claire's stomach tightened before she understood why. "Family," she began, "is legacy. It's responsibility. It's a commitment to something bigger than yourself." People nodded. Evan's father smiled proudly. Marjorie's eyes swept the room and finally settled on Claire with a practiced softness. "We all admire Claire," she said, and the room leaned in because praise for Marjorie was currency. "She's resilient. She's strong." Marjorie paused, letting the compliment sit like honey. Then she added, "And she's had to be. Life has been hard on her, hasn't it?" Claire felt heat rush up her neck. She looked at Evan, expecting him to laugh it off, squeeze her hand, signal, "We're fine." Evan's grit softened, just slightly. A tiny retreat. Claire felt something cold settle behind her ribs. Marjorie lifted the folder like it was a ledger. "Marriage isn't just love," she continued. "It's partnership, a shared foundation." She opened the folder and pulled out pages. Credit reports, a foreclosure notice tied to Claire's mother from years ago, and a printed screenshot of an old medical bill from Noah's asthma scare. Claire's throat closed. It was the violation that stunned her more than the humiliation. These weren't rumors, these were documents. Someone had gone looking. "Those are private," Claire managed, voice thin. Marjorie's eyes glittered. "Private is a luxury," she said softly, then raised her voice like she was teaching a lesson. "We ran the numbers. We looked at what each person brings into a union. Assets, obligations, risk." The word risk floated through the room like smoke, and we realized something important. Evan deserves a life without baggage. The laughter that followed wasn't joyful. It was obedient. Phones rose. Someone angled a camera for the perfect humiliation clip. Claire stood perfectly still, because if she moved too suddenly, she might shatter. She turned to Evan. She waited. She watched his face, his fear, his shame, his cowardice, fight in silence. Finally, Evan looked down at his shoes and said the cruelest word a quiet coward can say. "Later," he whispered. "Claire, maybe we should talk later." Later snapped something inside her with a quiet final click. Claire didn't beg. Begging would have been a second humiliation, and she had promised herself years ago she would not teach Noah that love requires you to shrink. She smoothed her dress with shaking fingers like she was straightening her dignity. She crossed the room, took Noah's hand, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "We're leaving." Noah looked confused, then scared. Claire kept her voice soft. "It's okay," she said, even though it wasn't. She walked out with her back straight, while behind her the club continued like her pain was just another form of entertainment. Outside, the ocean wind slapped her awake. The night smelled like salt and judgment. Claire stood near the service entrance because it was the only place without eyes, and she stared at her phone as notifications stacked like debris. A door creaked. A man stepped out carrying boxes. Plain hoodie, scuffed work boots, cap pulled low. He looked like part of the building's shadow, the kind of people rich guests don't even register. But his eyes weren't empty, they were sharp. "Don't go home yet," he said quietly. Claire blinked. "Excuse me?" He shifted the boxes, gaze flicking toward the glowing club windows. "They're about to blame you for something you didn't do," he said. Claire's stomach tightened. "Who are you?" The man hesitated just enough to suggest he was choosing a safe lie. "Eli," he said. "Eli Rowe." Before Claire could respond, her phone buzzed with an email alert she hadn't expected. "Disaster relief account review, urgent." The storm 2 weeks earlier had chewed through Riverton. Flooded basements, broken roofs, families displaced. The town had announced a relief fund, and everyone applauded because applause is cheap. Claire opened the email and felt the world tilt. "Your signature appears on the emergency withdrawal authorization," it read. "Please respond immediately." Her mouth went dry. She hadn't signed anything. She hadn't even seen the account. She looked up, and Eli was watching her face like he just watched the next domino fall exactly as predicted. "I told you," he said softly. "They're coming for your name." And hook. Claire's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, one sentence. "Confess, or we bury you."
By morning, Riverton felt louder, even when it was quiet. The same streets, the same ocean wind, the same people. But Claire could sense the shift, the way humiliation travels ahead of you like a rumor with legs. The engagement clip was everywhere, cropped, captioned, reposted with dramatic music, reduced to a meme. In one version, Marjorie looked calm and wise, and Claire looked like a reckless outsider who'd tried to climb above her station. Comments rolled in like stones. She got what she deserved. Single moms always want a payday. Hales dodged a bullet. And what hurt wasn't only the cruelty, it was the certainty. It was the way strangers wrote her life as if they knew it. Noah was quiet in the car on the way to school, staring at his shoes the way Evan had. Claire hated that the pattern was spreading. "Are we in trouble?" Noah asked, voice small. Claire forced warmth into her tone because her body was already teaching Noah fear without her words helping. "No," she said, "we're okay." But she didn't say it like she believed it, and Noah heard that. He nodded too quickly and turned his face to the window. At drop-off, Claire lingered for a second too long, watching Noah's small shoulders disappear into the building. Kids ran past, backpacks bouncing, normal life happening without permission. Claire realized she was jealous of normal. Then her phone buzzed with another notification. Someone had tagged her in a post. Anyone else think she planned it? Claire deleted the notification without opening the comments because she couldn't afford to take in poison right before a fight. At the resort site office, the air was wrong. Too still, too polite, too careful. Her supervisor, Janice, waited at the door, with HR on a speakerphone. A printed stack of paper sat on the desk. Withdrawal authorization, vendor invoices, a signature line with Claire Winters written in a slanted script that looked like hers from far away, the kind of forgery that assumed nobody would look closely. "We're conducting an internal review," the HR voice said, soft and professional. "The town contacted us this morning. There's an issue with a relief fund withdrawal. Your name appears on the authorization." Claire's chest tightened. "That's impossible," she said. "I didn't sign anything. I don't have access to that account." Janice wouldn't read her eyes. "The signature is there," she murmured, like paper mattered more than a person. Claire stared at the page and felt the strangest sensation, like someone had reached into her life and moved her pieces while she slept. "Who else had access?" she demanded. Janice flinched. "It's a shared workflow," she said quickly. "Lots of people." "Then why is only my name on it?" Claire asked. Silence. Then HR, still polite. "For now, we're placing you on administrative leave pending investigation." Claire tried to keep her voice steady. "I want a copy of everything you have," she said. "The original authorization, the audit trail, the login records." Another pause. "We can provide what's appropriate," HR replied. What's appropriate? Claire heard the meaning. What protects them? By lunch, administrative leave had become termination to protect the integrity of the process. Claire's badge stopped working. Security watched her pack up a cheap mug, Noah's drawing, and a stack of notes she'd written to keep her life from unraveling. She didn't cry there. If she cried, the rumor would grow teeth. Outside, the sky was too blue for disaster. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Confess and we'll be merciful. Then another. We can make this worse. Claire tried to call Evan, just once, because part of her still wanted to believe he would fix what his mother broke. He didn't answer. A minute later, one of Marjorie's friends posted a smiling photo from the party captioned, "Family first," and Claire felt the cold understanding settled. They'd already moved on. They'd already printed the story. She was the loose end they were tying off. The police showed up that afternoon, not with handcuffs, yet, but with that cautious procedural politeness that makes you feel guilty for breathing. 2 officers stood in her doorway while Noah played quietly in his room. One of them held a clipboard like it was neutral. "Miss Winters," he said, "we're conducting an information about a relief fund discrepancy. We understand you may have insight." "I have no insight," Claire said. "I didn't sign anything." The officer nodded like he'd heard that before. "Your signature appears on a withdrawal," he said. Claire's jaw clenched. "Then someone forged it." "We'll determine that," the officer replied. Claire took a breath. "I want the original document, not a copy, and I want the vendor information associated with the withdrawal." The officers exchanged a glance. "We can request that," he said, which meant, "You'll get it when we decide."
After they left, Claire stood in her kitchen shaking. Noah came out and asked, "Are we in trouble? Again?" "No," Claire said, forcing steadiness. Noah frowned, but they looked like they knew. Claire's throat tightened. "Sometimes adults act sure when they don't want to look wrong," she said softly. She drove to the grocery store because Noah still needed dinner and rent still needed paying. Under fluorescent lights, people stared. A woman Claire recognized, someone she'd once helped carry bags to a car, stopped mid-aisle and looked at Claire like she had become a warning sign. At checkout, the cashier scanned Claire's items and said too loudly, "It's sad what people will do for money." The line behind her leaned out like they paid admission. Claire froze, then forced herself to breathe. Arguing would feed them. She paid, and walked out with her bags and her dignity clenched in her fist. In the parking lot, she found a fresh scratch carved into her car door. Thin, deliberate. Her phone buzzed again, and this time a new contact appeared. "Eli, Route 6 Diner. Don't drive straight home. Bring nothing you can't lose." The route to the diner felt like a lesson in paranoia. Claire checked mirrors. She forced her shoulders to stay relaxed. She made 3 turns like Eli later told her to do. When she parked, she noticed a sedan idling at the far edge of the lot, headlights off. It drove away when she looked. Inside, the diner smelled like burnt coffee and old vinyl. Eli sat in a back booth facing the door, plain hoodie, scuffed boots, posture of someone who learned long ago that being overlooked is useful. Claire slid into the booth, heart pounding. "How did you know?" Eli didn't flinch. "Because this isn't new," he said. "The storm gave them cover. Your engagement party gave them a story, and your name gave them a scapegoat. I'm not important enough for this," whispered Claire. "That's the point," Eli said gently. "You're believable, you're clean, and the town will enjoy blaming you." Claire's throat tightened. "Why are you helping me?" Eli hesitated, just a fraction too long, then said, "Because I hate thieves, and I hate bullies." He slid an envelope across the table, enough to breathe. Claire tried to push it back. "I can't. Not charity," Eli sighed, reading her face. "A bridge." He explained he could get her contract work at a document hub, where vendor invoices passed through for archiving. A quiet junction point where evidence lived or died. Claire stared at him, distrust thick. "You want me to go back into their system?" "I want you to learn how their lies move," Eli corrected, "so we can stop them." He leaned in, voice low. "Start a folder on your phone. Screenshots, timestamps, emails, everything." "Why?" Claire asked. Eli's eyes held hers. "Because truth doesn't win because it's true. It wins because it's provable." Claire opened her phone, created a folder, and named it Receipts. On the drive home, she followed Eli's instructions. No direct route, 3 turns, a stop under bright lights. A car trailed her for 2 blocks, and then disappeared when she pulled into a gas station. Claire sat under fluorescent lights, hands trembling on the wheel, and understood the new reality. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was coordination. And hook. At 1:11 a.m., Claire's phone buzzed with a new message. "Sign the confession by morning, or Noah pays for your stubbornness."
Claire didn't sleep after that message. She sat at her kitchen table with her phone face down, like looking at it might make the threat more real. Noah slept in his room, breathing slow and even, unaware of how close fear had moved to the walls of their home. Claire stared at the clock until it felt like time was taunting her. She thought of calling the police, then stopped, because the police had already come, and they had looked at her like a suspect. She thought of calling Evan, then stopped, because Evan had already chosen later. So Claire did the only thing that made her feel less helpless. She documented. She took screenshots. She saved them. She printed them at the library the next morning, and watched the papers slide out of the printer like proof that fear had a shape. The document hub became Claire's strange refuge. It was bland enough to feel harmless. Gray carpet, toner smell, fluorescent hum. She wore a temporary sticker badge with her name handwritten in marker. Nobody greeted her like she mattered. For the first time in weeks, being ignored felt like a kind of protection. She worked quietly, indexing boxes, cross-checking vendor numbers, learning the rhythm of the place. And she learned something else too. When people think you're harmless, they stop protecting their secrets from you. Within hours, Claire saw money behaving badly. Duplicate payments, round numbers too neat, vendor addresses that didn't match any real building when she searched them. Claire wasn't a forensic accountant, but she'd stretched dollars until they cried, and she knew when numbers were lying. She started keeping a small notebook tucked into her bag, not for dramatic diary entries, just dates, invoice numbers, names of file folders, tiny anchors that would matter later. Eli appeared once in the hallway pushing a cart of office supplies. He didn't wave. He didn't acknowledge her in a way that would look like connection. As he passed her desk, he murmured, "Box 3, blue folder."
Claire waited until he disappeared, then opened box 3. The blue folder held invoices for a vendor called Harbor Light Services. The amounts were clean and confident, the kind of numbers you write when you assume no one will check. Claire searched the vendor registry database. Nothing. No Harbor Light, no license, no registered address. Her pulse spiked, but she forced her face neutral, because bored women don't look dangerous. She pretended to yawn, pretended to stretch, and took photos under the desk. She printed the invoice and slipped it into her bag like contraband. That night she met Eli behind the diner near the dumpsters where cameras didn't bother to point. "Harbor Light doesn't exist," she whispered. Eli's eyes sharpened. "Good," he said. "That's a thread." "How do we pull it?" Claire asked. "Slowly," Eli said, "because they're watching for anyone who pulls too hard." Over the next few days, Claire built her receipt box the way some people build a lifeboat. Quietly, urgently, with stubborn focus. She printed invoices and stapled them to notes with dates and times. She saved email headers. She wrote down names of people who avoided her, and names of people who suddenly became friendly after ignoring her for months. She began to recognize fear in others, the way coworkers flinched when the mayor's name came up, the way a finance assistant always arrived 5 minutes after Claire requested a file, like someone was monitoring her. Noah's world started to shift too, and that was the part that broke Claire's heart the most. One afternoon, Noah came home quieter than usual, shoulders hunched. "A boy said my mom's going to jail," he whispered. Claire felt rage flare so bright it scared her. She pulled him onto the couch and held him like an anchor. "People repeat ugly things when they don't know the truth," she said. Noah's eyes shimmered. "What if they do know?" Claire swallowed hard. "Then we show them," she promised. The next day, Claire got a call from the school secretary asking her to come in. In the principal's office, the air smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. The principal spoke in a careful voice about social tensions and children repeating what they hear. Claire sat with her hands folded and asked, very calmly, "What are you doing to protect my son?" The principal blinked, surprised by the directness. "We speak to the children," she said. Claire leaned forward. "Speak is not protect," Claire replied. "My child is 9. The principal promised monitoring. Claire walked out feeling like she just fought a small battle inside a bigger war. That weekend, she drove to her mother's apartment because she needed a room where the world wasn't watching. June opened the door with tired eyes and pulled Claire into a hug. "Honey," June whispered, "I saw the video." Claire stiffened with shame. June held her tighter. "I don't care what it looked like," she said. "I care what it did to you." Claire's voice cracked. "They think I stole relief money." June's face tightened. "Who thinks that?" Claire laughed bitterly. "Everyone." June cupped Claire's cheek. "Not me," she said, "and not Noah, and not the people worth keeping." Claire swallowed tears. "I'm scared." June nodded slowly. "Of course you are. Fear isn't weakness, it's a signal." Her eyes sharpened. "If you're going to fight them, don't fight alone." Claire hesitated, then said carefully, "I have someone helping me." June studied her. "A good someone?" Claire thought of Eli's steady gaze, the way he never demanded gratitude. "I think so," Claire whispered. June nodded once and pressed an envelope of cash into Claire's hand when she left. "Let me help," she said simply. 2 days later, Evan Hale showed up at her apartment holding flowers like props for a story where he was still the hero. He looked tired, not from love, but from consequences. "Claire," he said softly, "please, can we talk?" Claire didn't invite him in. "Say what you came to say." Evan's eyes flicked past her shoulder, scanning the apartment as if he expected it to be messy, as if he needed her to look broken so he could justify leaving. "My mom, things got out of hand," he began. Claire laughed once, bitter, out of hand. He switched tactics, pulling out an envelope. "I can make this go away," he said. "You sign an NDA, you stop talking, you stop digging, and my family will contribute. You can start over somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" Like her life was an inconvenience. "You want me to confess to something I didn't do," Claire said. Evan's voice sharpened. "I want you to be smart. Noah needs stability." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Don't use my son to blackmail me." Evan snapped, "This town belongs to my mother," and looked shocked he'd said it out loud. Claire's voice went quiet. "Then you belong to her too." Evan warned, "You don't know who you're fighting." "I'm fighting people who steal from storm victims," Claire said, "and I'm done being edited." That night, a ledger page appeared taped to her door with "Thief" scrawled in marker. Claire photographed it, filed it, and added it to the shoebox. The next day, Mrs. Delaney, the librarian, the woman who knew everyone's secrets, because secrets eventually needed somewhere to live, asked Claire to meet after closing. "They've done this before," Mrs. Delaney whispered, telling her about a woman named Lena who flagged contracts and vanished. Then Mrs. Delaney slipped a flash drive into Claire's palm with trembling fingers. "I've held this for years," she admitted. "I hated myself." "You're doing it now," Claire said. "That matters." At home, she opened the drive and watched files populate. Scanned contracts, email chains, permit documents, a spreadsheet labeled HL services with dates and amounts. Harbor Light wasn't a threat anymore. It was a rope. Claire backed everything up twice and met Eli with a folder of printouts. Eli's calm slipped for a moment, showing anger behind the glass. "This is bigger," he said. "Then we need something undeniable," Claire replied. Eli nodded once. "We set a test," he said. "A harmless typo. If it surfaces where it shouldn't, we'll know exactly who's watching." And hook. 12 minutes after Claire planted the typo invoice, it appeared in a forwarded email from the mayor's office, and Claire realized the trap had a face.
The sting worked so fast it felt like the town had been waiting for Claire to make one wrong move. Claire planted the test invoice with the unique typo, Riverton, in a file stack nobody should have touched, then went back to her desk and forced her face into boredom. She answered a coworker's question about staples, she refilled a printer tray, she made herself look harmless. 12 minutes later, the typo showed up in an email forwarded from the mayor's office to a contractor. Claire stared at the screen, adrenaline flooding her veins. She saved the email headers, she printed them, she photographed them, she backed them up twice. When she met Eli behind the diner, she expected him to be pleased. He was, just not in a comforting way. His eyes looked satisfied the way storms look before they break. "Now we know where the leak lives," he said. Claire's voice shook. "What do we do with it?" Eli's gaze sharpened. "We build a bigger trap," he said, "something they can't resist touching." The pressure tightened around Claire's life almost immediately, as if someone sensed she'd stepped closer to the truth and decided to squeeze. Her tire went flat, clean puncture, not a nail. A note under her wiper said, "Stop digging." Noah's teacher called again. The principal suggested Claire avoid drawing attention, as if visibility was the problem and not cruelty. Claire sat in her car afterward and realized she'd spent years being taught that peace means silence, and she was done paying that price. At the document hub, drawers were opened, files shifted, folders returned just slightly wrong. A security guard named Ron walked her to her car, just being polite, until one evening Ron looked pale and confessed, "A man came by asking about you, smiled like it was a joke, mentioned my grandson's school." Claire felt cold. "They threatened your family?" Ron nodded, shame flashing. "I'm sorry." Claire squeezed his hand. "No, you did the right thing." That night, Claire found a small envelope wedged under her apartment door. No stamp, no name. Inside was a photocopy of a single bank line item, just enough to scare her, not enough to prove anything, like someone was saying, "We can show you what we want you to see." Claire photographed it, filed it, and forced herself not to panic. When Claire told Eli about Ron, Eli's face went frighteningly calm. "They crossed a line," he said. "They'll keep crossing," Claire replied. "Then we end it faster," Eli said. The bigger trap was a private meeting where Marjorie Hale would believe she was buying Claire's silence, because Marjorie didn't just want Claire quiet, Marjorie wanted Claire ashamed. "You'll play desperate," Eli instructed. "They'll relax. Predators only show their teeth when they think you've accepted your place." Claire hated the idea of pretending to be the woman they'd already decided she was, but she understood. Sometimes you wear their assumptions like armor until you're close enough to stab the lie. Claire practiced in her bathroom mirror. Softer voice, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes that looked tired instead of angry. Strategy, not weakness. She practiced saying, "I want it to stop," until the words came out like surrender. The hotel lounge smelled like polished glass and expensive neutrality. Marjorie arrived in pearls and calm confidence. Mayor Walsh's aide Pierce sat beside her like a shadow with teeth. Daniel Klein placed his briefcase on the table like a shield. Claire walked in alone, heart hammering, and sat with her hands folded. Marjorie smiled. "You've had a difficult week." Claire let desperation tint her voice. "I want it to stop." Marjorie leaned back, satisfied. "Good. Then you'll sign what we put in front of you." The NDA slid across. Claire picked up the pen. "Before I sign," Claire said, "I have proof." Marjorie's eyes narrowed. "What proof?" Claire slid the controlled folder across, the lantern designed to light up anyone who touched it. Marjorie opened it, scanned the first page, and her calm cracked. "Give this to me," Marjorie demanded. Claire paused. "How much is my silence worth?" Marjorie smiled cold. "More than you deserve, and less than you think." Pierce watched Claire with bored confidence. Klein tapped his briefcase, irritated. Then Klein muttered under his breath, "We need this covered before the pension meeting, just like last time." The room went still. Claire felt the words hit her like ice water. "Pension," she repeated. Marjorie's gaze cut to Klein like a knife. Pierce's smile faltered. "What pension meeting?" Claire asked, voice sharper now. Marjorie leaned forward, eyes hard. "You don't need to concern yourself with things beyond your comprehension." "Beyond your comprehension." Like poverty made you stupid, like being a single mom made you disposable. Claire swallowed bile. She signed anyway, because the trap needed them to believe she was surrendering. Marjorie snatched the folder and murmured, "Good girl," like praise could be a slap. Claire walked out with her lungs burning. In the restroom stall, she pressed her forehead to the door and breathed through the urge to cry. Release was expensive. Instead, she whispered, "Not today," like a vow. When she got into Eli's car, she whispered, "They said pension." Eli's jaw tightened. "Worse," he said. "They're stealing from everyone." Claire stared ahead through the windshield at the town lights and felt her fear sharpened into something cleaner, purpose. "Then we don't end this quietly," she said. Eli glanced at her, then nodded. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." And Hook. Eli drove toward downtown and said, "You deserve the full truth, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it." Eli drove like he was holding back a storm, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward. And when Claire demanded, "What does pension mean?" he didn't soften it. Soft lies were still lies. "It's not just the relief fund," he admitted. "They dipped into municipal retirement allocations, medical supply purchasing, housing vouchers. Claire felt nauseous thinking of neighbors who'd worked their whole lives and trusted the system to keep a promise, thinking of the clinic's shortages, thinking of families sleeping on couches after the storm. "And they needed your name to cover the trail," Eli said. Claire turned toward him, anger shaking her. "Who are you?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Not in this car." He drove to a downtown building Claire had only ever seen from sidewalks: polished stone, quiet security, a private elevator. Upstairs, the office was calm and expensive without being flashy. Eli walked to a desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder with an embossed name: Nathaniel Rowe. Claire's breath stopped. "Rowe? Like Rowe Capital?" Eli nodded once. "My real name is Nathaniel Rowe. I'm the majority investor behind the resort development." Claire's mind tried to reject it. Work boots, boxes, hoodie. Then she remembered how executives didn't question him in hallways, how he spoke about patterns and proof like someone trained in consequences. "I went undercover," Nathaniel continued, "because if they knew I was watching, they'd hide the trail and blame someone else, someone like you." Claire's throat tightened. "So you involved me." "They involved you first," Nathaniel said softly. "I tried to pull you out without tipping them off, but you were already in it." Claire's eyes burned. "You watched me get humiliated." Nathaniel's gaze held pain. "And it made me want to tear that room apart. But if I stepped in them, they would have pivoted, they would have buried evidence, and they would have picked another scapegoat." Claire shook, exhausted from being manipulated by people in different directions. "How do I know you're not manipulating me too?" Nathaniel didn't lie. "You don't. So you get a choice." He slid a document across the desk: protection, relocation, support for Noah. "You can walk away. I'll still finish this." Claire stared at the paper, then pictured Noah at school, Noah's shoulders hunched, Noah learning that truth can be optional if money wants it to be. "No," Claire said. Nathaniel blinked. "No?" "I'm not walking away," Claire said. "I'm walking in, and we end this publicly." Something like respect settled into Nathaniel's eyes. "Then we bring the last receipt." The attack-counterattack arrived fast, a restraining order request alleging Claire was harassing the Hales, police check-ins, subtle social posts implying Claire was unstable, Noah overhearing adult whispers. Claire obeyed every boundary precisely because she refused to give them even a crumb to twist. At the library, Mrs. Delaney whispered, "They came asking about you." At the parking lot, another tire puncture. Nathaniel's calm never broke. "They're trying to label you," he said, "so we move faster." 2 nights before town hall, Mrs. Delaney called with a whisper. "I found something, a permit file stamped through Marjorie's foundation, and an email tucked inside." "What does it say?" Claire asked. Mrs. Delaney swallowed. "Use Claire Winters. She's disposable." Claire's breath left her body. She texted Nathaniel, "We have intent." He replied instantly, "I'm with you." Dawn came gray and damp. Claire met Mrs. Delaney at the church parking lot. The librarian's hands shook as she passed the sealed envelope. "I'm sorry I waited," she whispered. Claire squeezed her hand. "You're doing it now." Mrs. Delaney confessed they'd threatened her sister at the clinic. Claire's jaw tightened. "After tonight, they won't have that power." Nathaniel read the email and went still. "That's it," he said softly. "That's the last receipt." Claire went home, made Noah pancakes, helped him with homework, packed her evidence into labeled folders, and rehearsed her opening line until her voice stopped shaking. At 6:58 p.m., she stood outside the community center, heard the crowd inside, and whispered, "Okay, let's end this." At 7 p.m., the community center filled fast, folding chairs scraping, voices buzzing with suspicion and hunger, and Marjorie sat front row in navy, calm as if she couldn't imagine consequence, while Mayor Walsh stood at the podium with practiced empathy. Evan sat near his mother, pale and rigid. Claire sat in the middle rows with Noah beside her, his small hand gripping hers. Nathaniel stood at the back, quiet, steady. The mayor began with condolences and promises, and then one sharp sentence. "We have reason to believe an individual exploited our relief system." Heads turned toward Claire like gravity. Claire stood. "Excuse me." "Ms. Winters, this is exactly the place," Claire cut in. "You've been telling a story about me in public. Now I'm going to tell the truth." She walked to the microphone on legs that wanted to shake and plugged in the screen connection Nathaniel's team prepared. The projector flickered to life. Claire started with the threats, screenshots with timestamps, then Harbor Light invoices, then registry searches proving Harbor Light didn't exist, then the typo sting, Riverton, appearing in a forwarded email from the mayor's office within 12 minutes. Email headers, routing data, proof arranged like a staircase the room could climb. Mayor Walsh insisted it was manipulated. Marjorie stood with her sweet voice and tried to call it grief. Claire turned, eyes steady. Don't call this grief, call it proof. Claire opened the sealed envelope and read the line that cut through the room. Use Claire Winters, she's disposable. The silence was violent. Then the room erupted. Pension checks, medications, vouchers, anger turning into a chorus of consequence. The mayor tried to regain control with words like investigate. Nathaniel stepped forward, calm as a judge. You won't investigate yourselves, because I already did. Marjorie demanded his name. Nathaniel Rowe, gasps, whispers. He announced the audit, the fraud, the shell vendors, the forged approvals, the coordination. He suspended contracts. He promised restitution within 72 hours with independent oversight. The mayor's brother shouted, "You said it was clean," a confession the room heard clearly. Evan stood shaking and finally said what his fear couldn't hold anymore. She did it. She told them to use Claire. Marjorie hissed at him and the mask fell. Afterwards, consequences came in paperwork and resignations and restitution checks, in clinics receiving supplies, in pension accounts replenished, in people apologizing awkwardly because they'd been wrong. Claire accepted sincere apologies and ignored performative ones. She deleted Evan's long message without replying. Months later, the waterfront club no longer made Claire flinch. She walked past it with Noah laughing beside her, and the ocean looked like a promise again. Claire accepted a role on the oversight board, not for approval, but for prevention. Nathaniel stayed present without controlling, no hero speeches, just consistent action. One evening, he met Claire outside the Route 6 diner and handed her a small frame. Inside was a crumpled coffee receipt from their first meeting. On the back, in neat handwriting, the first receipt. Claire laughed softly. You kept this? Nathaniel's eyes softened. You told me to keep receipts. I took you seriously. Claire looked up at him. They tried to bury my name. Nathaniel stepped closer, careful, respectful. All they did was plant it. And for a few seconds, standing in that community center, with Noah's hand in hers, and the whole town finally facing the truth, Claire let herself believe the worst part was over. But justice doesn't end when the room claps. It begins when the powerful try to survive it. End hook. As Claire stepped outside into the cold night air, her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. Only 4 words this time. This isn't finished. Smile. The parking lot outside the community center smelled like damp asphalt and winter breath, and for a moment Claire just stood there with Noah's hand in hers, blinking at the ordinary streetlights as if they belonged to a different world than the one she'd just survived. Inside, people were still talking, voices rising and falling through the walls, some angry, some shocked, some pretending they'd been on the right side all along. Nathaniel moved through the crowd behind them like a calm tide, quietly steering his legal team toward the mayor, toward the Meckerds clerk, toward the police liaison who now looked uncertain about which side he'd been serving. Claire tried not to watch Marjorie too long as Marjorie was escorted into a side room for questions, because Claire had spent too many weeks letting Marjorie's composure tell her what reality was. Still, she caught one last look, Marjorie's face arranged into that familiar calm, but her eyes no longer glittered with certainty. They flickered. That flicker should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a warning. Noah tugged Claire's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling with adrenaline. "Are we okay now?" Claire wanted to say yes. She wanted to hand her son a clean answer the way she handed him pancakes in the morning. Warm, simple, safe. But she'd learned the difference between safe and safer. She crouched, pulled Noah close, and spoke into his hair so her voice could stay steady. "We're safer," she said, "and we're not alone." Noah nodded like he was trying to be brave, but Claire felt how tight his little fingers still were around hers, and she hated the people who had forced a child to practice bravery. Her phone buzzed before she could take a full breath. An unknown number. 4 words. "This isn't finished. Smile." Claire's stomach dropped, not because she believed she'd lose, but because she recognized the tactic. When the truth takes the stage, intimidation tries to sneak in through the back door. Claire didn't show Noah. She slipped the phone into her pocket, forced a calm exhale, and walked toward her car. Nathaniel stepped beside her without touching. "You got a message," he said quietly. Not a question, just observation. Claire nodded once. "They're not done," she replied. Nathaniel's jaw tightened in a way Claire hadn't seen in the community center. In public, he'd been calm as a judge. In the parking lot, his anger had somewhere to live. "They won't be," he said. "Not until the handcuffs click."
That night didn't end with fireworks. It ended with logistics. Nathaniel insisted on driving behind Claire all the way home, not close enough to look like a convoy, but close enough to respond if someone tried something stupid. He had one of his security contractors do a slow sweep of Claire's street before she parked, and Claire hated how familiar that caution already felt. At home, Noah went straight to his room and shut the door, and Claire knew he was finally letting himself shake. Claire stood in her kitchen, stared at her sink full of dishes, and felt her hands start to tremble now that the room wasn't watching. She pressed her palms flat against the counter and whispered, "Okay," to nobody, because sometimes you have to speak your own steadiness into existence. The next morning, Riverton woke up hungry. Local news ran a segment with careful language, allegations, audit, ongoing investigation. But social media was less careful. Clips from town hall spread. People replayed Marjorie's face when the email was read. People paused the video on Nathaniel saying his name, as if his identity was the real entertainment. And then, like always, the internet picked its favorite lie, that Claire had planned it all with Nathaniel, that she'd seduced him, that she was a con artist who had finally found a bigger con. The new rumor wasn't designed to put her in jail. It was designed to put her back in her assigned role, untrustworthy, disposable. Claire heard it in the grocery store, whispers when she reached for bread, a woman murmuring, "That investor's probably using her," and another answering, "Or she's using him." Claire kept walking. She refused to turn. She refused to perform emotional labor for people who only understood stories when they were convenient. But Noah heard it too. At school, a teacher pulled Claire aside and said gently, "Some parents are concerned." Concerned. Claire stared at the teacher. Concerned about what? The teacher hesitated. About safety. About publicity. Claire's jaw clenched. "My child's safety was threatened because adults chose to bully him," she said calmly. "If anyone is concerned, they should be concerned about that." The teacher's cheeks flushed. "Of course," she said, and Claire walked away feeling like she just negotiated for oxygen. 2 days later, Claire received a subpoena, a neat envelope, official header lead. The words looked almost polite. "You are requested to appear." Requested, as if her life hadn't been forced into public. Nathaniel called her within an hour. "You got it," he said. Claire swallowed. "Yes." Nathaniel's voice stayed even. "I have counsel for you," he said. "A woman named Denise Klein, no relation to Daniel. She's fierce, and she doesn't scare easy." Claire hesitated. Pride rose in her like an old reflex. Nathaniel heard the silence. "Claire," he said softly, "this isn't charity. This is infrastructure. You deserve it." Claire exhaled, long. "Okay," she said. "Tell me what to do." That afternoon, Marjorie's attorney held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Marjorie did not appear. She didn't do vulnerability. But her attorney did the next best thing. He wrapped her in language. "My client has been the target of a coordinated smear campaign," he declared. "A disgruntled former acquaintance is attempting to weaponize private communications." Claire watched the clip on her phone and felt her stomach turn. Weaponize private communications. The email telling them to use her, disposable, was being reframed as private. Claire realized something chilling. Marjorie wasn't fighting the facts. She was fighting the frame. That night, when Claire walked out to her car, she found her driver's side door slightly ajar. Not open, just not fully closed. Her throat tightened. She did not touch it. She stepped back, pulled her phone out, and called Nathaniel. "Someone's been in my car," she whispered. Nathaniel's voice turned sharp. "Get inside. Lock the door. Do not touch anything." Claire obeyed. 10 minutes later, one of Nathaniel's security contractors arrived, gloved, careful. They found nothing stolen, but they found something moved. Her glove compartment papers rearranged, a printed copy of her subpoena left on top like a calling card. The message was clear. "We know what you're doing. We're still watching." Claire sat on her couch after, staring at the wall while Noah slept. She felt fear, yes, but underneath it, she felt a hard, quiet fury. "They still think I'll fold," she whispered. Nathaniel, standing near her doorway, didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "They think because you were poor, you're pliable." Claire looked up. Nathaniel's eyes were steady. "They don't understand what poor teaches you," he continued. "It teaches you endurance." Claire exhaled, and for the first time since town hall, she let a tear fall, not as surrender, but as release. Nathaniel didn't touch her. He just stayed close enough that she could borrow the steadiness if she needed it. And hug. The next morning, Claire got a message from a number she did recognize this time, Evan's. Only 6 words. "I have something you need. Meet me."
Evan chose a place that felt like an apology without words. A small park near the water where families fed ducks and nobody wore pearls. Claire arrived early and sat on a bench with her receipts folder in her bag like a heartbeat. Nathaniel stayed in the car across the street, not hovering, not controlling, just present. Evan walked up looking like a man who hadn't slept since town hall. His hair was unstyled, his coat was wrinkled. The glow of his family's certainty was gone. He sat down slowly, keeping distance like he knew he'd lost the right to closeness. "Claire," he said, voice raw, "I'm not here to ask you to forgive me." Claire didn't answer. She waited. Evan swallowed. "I'm here because my mother is going to try to destroy you," he said. Claire's mouth tightened. "She's been trying." Evan nodded, shame flashing. "She's escalating," he whispered. "She thinks if she can bury you in process, lawyers, hearings, headlines, you'll get tired and disappear." Claire stared at him. "And you?" she asked. Evan's shoulders slumped. "I let her," he admitted. The honesty didn't redeem him. It just made him human again, which was almost worse, because it meant he had always had a choice. Evan reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. "I have an audio clip," he said, "from the hotel lounge." Claire's pulse jumped. "How?" Evan's laugh was bitter. "My mother's assistant forwarded me a file, something she thought was insurance, and she didn't realize I'd save it." Evan's hand shook as he tapped. Then he slid the phone toward Claire. On the screen was a voice memo. Claire pressed play. Marjorie's voice filled the space between them, smooth, cold. "She'll sign," Marjorie said. Pierce's voice followed, amused. "She's scared." And then Marjorie again, quieter, meaner. "Good. Fear makes people obedient. Just make sure the paperwork lands where we want it." Claire stopped the recording, breath tight. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked. Evan's eyes glistened. "Because the truth is bigger than my cowardice," he whispered, "and because Noah didn't deserve what I let happen." Claire held his gaze. For a second she saw the man she'd loved. Then she saw the man he'd chosen to be. "Send it to my lawyer," she said calmly. "Not to me." Evan nodded quickly, relieved to have instruction. "I will," he said, then smaller. "Claire, I'm sorry." Claire stood. "Sorry doesn't change the past," she said, "but it can change what you do next." Evan swallowed hard. "I'll testify," he said, and Claire felt the smallest flicker of satisfaction, not because she wanted him back, but because she wanted him accountable. The deposition took place in a conference room that smelled like coffee and photocopier toner, a room designed to feel neutral while it pried open people's lives. Claire sat with Denise Klein beside her, sharp-eyed, composed, the kind of lawyer who didn't waste energy performing confidence because she actually had it. Denise leaned close and whispered, "They'll try to make you emotional. Your job is to be precise." Claire nodded, fingers clasped. Across the table, Marjorie's attorney sat with a thin smile. Marjorie herself didn't attend. She didn't do rooms where she wasn't in control. They started with the predictable, Claire's finances, her past, her stability. They asked about Noah's father. They asked about the foreclosure notice. They asked about her motives, as if truth always needed a hidden price tag. Claire answered calmly. "My motive was to survive," she said, "and to stop theft from people who couldn't afford it." The attorney tried to smirk. "So you admit you were under financial strain?" Denise cut in smoothly. "Objection to characterization," she said. Claire watched the attorney's smile falter and felt a surge of gratitude. Infrastructure. Nathaniel had been right. Then came the twist attempt. Marjorie's attorney slid a document across the table, an alleged confession signed by Claire, a statement claiming she'd accessed funds under duress and regret. Claire's stomach dropped, not because she believed it would work, but because she recognized the cruelty. They were trying to force her to defend reality again, as if she hadn't already done it publicly. Denise didn't blink. She leaned forward, examined the paper, and said, "We'll be requesting metadata and chain of custody. Immediately." Claire's voice stayed steady. "That isn't mine," she said. "I never signed this." The attorney shrugged. "It appears to match your signature." Claire swallowed, then replied, "My signature has already been forged once. You're repeating a pattern." Denise's eyes flicked toward Claire with approval. Nathaniel's team came prepared. Within hours, they produced a forensic report showing the confession had been generated on a device linked to a municipal office printer, the same network that had forwarded the typo email. The trap inside the trap snapshot. Denise laid the report on the table in a follow-up session and said, "This is attempted evidence fabrication." The room went colder. The attorney's smile disappeared. And then finally, Marjorie made her mistake. She showed up at the courthouse for a private meeting with the prosecutor, and cameras caught her in the hallway saying, in a low, angry voice, "That woman should have stayed grateful." The clip went everywhere. Riverton watched it on their phones like it was a soap opera, but Claire watched it and felt the truth. Marjorie couldn't help revealing herself when she thought she was above consequence. Evan testified 2 days later. He walked into the hearing room pale and shaking, and for the first time, he didn't look at the floor. He looked straight at the judge and said, "My mother instructed her team to use Claire Winters as cover for withdrawals. I heard the word disposable used. I failed to stop it." The room went silent. The prosecutor asked, "Why did you come forward now?" Evan's voice broke. "Because I watched a child get bullied for something his mother didn't do," he said, "and because I can't unsee my mother is." The arrest didn't happen with dramatic music. It happened in a courthouse hallway when 2 investigators approached Marjorie and said, "Mrs. Hale, we have a warrant." Marjorie's chin lifted. She tried the old posture. She tried the old smile. But the cameras caught what Claire recognized as real fear.
Marjorie looked at Denise, at Nathaniel, and finally at Claire with pure hatred. "You'll regret this," Marjorie hissed. Claire's voice was quiet. "No," she said. "You will." That night, Claire went home and sat at her kitchen table with Noah's homework spread out like ordinary life trying to return. Noah came in, rubbed his eyes, and asked, "Did we win?" Claire swallowed. "We're closer," she said again, because she'd learned not to promise clean endings. Noah climbed into her lap anyway, and Claire held him and felt the first real tremor of safety settled into her bones. End hook. The next morning, Denise called Claire with one sentence that made her breath catch. "The restitution plan is approved, but the town council is trying to block your oversight role."
If Marjorie's power had been built on quiet control, the town council's power was built on something even pettier: pride. They didn't want to admit they'd been fooled, and they didn't want the woman who'd exposed them to become part of the system that prevented it from happening again. The restitution plan moved forward. Pension accounts replenished, medical supplies ordered, housing vouchers processed. But the council tried to keep the oversight board symbolic, toothless, polite. Denise explained it to Claire in blunt terms. "They'll agree to repair," she said. "They'll resist reform, because reform requires confession." Claire listened, anger pulsing. "So what do we do?" Denise smiled slightly. "We use the same thing that won before," she said. "Receipts." Nathaniel offered to bulldoze the council with money and legal pressure. Claire stopped him. "No," she said quietly. "If you do that, they'll say this was always about you, about your power, about an outsider taking over." Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "What do you want?" he asked. Claire inhaled. "I want it built right," she said. "Transparent, community-led, not owned by one rich person, not owned by one family." Nathaniel's expression softened with something like pride. "Then we build it that way," he said. The first oversight meeting was held in the library because Mrs. Delaney insisted. "It should start where information lives," she said, and her voice shook but didn't break. The room filled with people who used to avoid each other's eyes: retirees, clinic workers, storm victims, a few embarrassed town officials, and Noah sitting in the back with a notebook like he was taking notes on how adults should behave. Claire stood at the front with a folder and a calm she'd earned the hard way. She didn't perform. She didn't preach. She did what Eli had taught her to do at the diner. She was precise. "Here is what we're changing," she said, and she held up the new oversight charter: public audits, third-party verification, community voting, a whistleblower hotline managed outside municipal networks. A councilman tried to interrupt. "This is excessive," he said. Claire looked at him and replied, "Excessive is stealing from pensions." The room murmured. The councilman flushed and sat back. After the meeting, a woman approached Claire with red eyes and a shaky smile. She introduced herself as Paige, a single mother who'd kept quiet about a contractor who'd offered her help in exchange for favors. Paige whispered, "I didn't say anything because I thought no one would believe me." Claire's chest tightened. She squeezed Paige's hand. "I believe you," Claire said, "and you're not alone." Paige started crying quietly, and Claire realized the ripple effect. When one person survives public shame, it gives others permission to speak. Noah's life changed in smaller ways that mattered more. He stopped asking, "Are we in trouble?" every time the doorbell rang. He stopped flinching at whispers. At school, one of the boys who'd bullied him tried to apologize awkwardly. Noah looked at the boy and said, "Don't say things you don't know," then walked away. Claire overheard it from the hallway and felt a tight ache of pride, because her son had learned boundaries, not bitterness. Evan moved out of town quietly. He didn't ask Claire to see him again. He sent one last message, simple, not self-pitying. "I'm trying to be someone I don't hate." Claire didn't reply, but she didn't delete it immediately either. She let it sit in her phone like a reminder that accountability can be a beginning, not a reward. As for Nathaniel, he stayed steady. He didn't turn the scandal into a brand. He didn't show up at meetings with speeches. He showed up with work, contracts rewritten, transparent funding, community control. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Claire sat on the steps outside the library while the sunset turned the ocean into copper. Nathaniel sat beside her, leaving space between their shoulders like a question he refused to force. "You're tired," he said softly. "I'm always tired," Claire replied, and surprised herself by smiling. Nathaniel's mouth twitched. "Fair," he said. Then, after a pause, "I'm sorry I met you through a crisis." Claire looked at him. "Me too," she admitted. "But it's real." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "It is. And Claire, I don't want to disappear now that the danger is quieter." Claire's throat tightened. "I don't want you to save me," she said, honest.
Nathaniel replied. That's why I'm not offering rescue. I'm offering partnership, if you want it. Claire stared at the sunset for a long moment, letting herself feel the strange safety of being asked instead of handled. Then she nodded once. I wanted, she said. Weeks later, the town held a small ceremony. Not for Nathaniel, not for the council, but for the Rebuild Relief Fund and the people who made sure it couldn't be stolen again. Claire didn't love ceremonies, but she stood on the stage because she learned that visibility, when chosen, can be power. She spoke briefly. Keep your receipts, she said, and the crowd laughed softly, then grew quiet as she continued. Not because you're looking for revenge, because proof protects people who don't have connections. Afterward, Nathaniel handed Claire a small frame. Inside was a crumbled coffee receipt from the diner, their first meeting. On the back, in neat handwriting, it read, The first receipt. Claire laughed, breath-catching. You kept this. You told me to keep receipts, he said. I took you seriously. Claire looked up, warmth spreading through her chest like a slow sunrise. They tried to bury my name, she whispered. Nathaniel stepped closer, careful, respectful, and said, All they did was planted. Claire leaned her forehead against his shoulder for one quiet second. No fireworks, no performance, just the simple truth of being held without being controlled. If you stayed to the end, subscribe to The Last Receipt. New long-form stories every week, where the truth doesn't whisper, it shows up with proof.